Good morning, Warrior Sages. I have a very special guest today, Anthony Fulker. And Anthony and I have been introduced by one of our very good friends, Andrew Resmer. And we hit it off right away. The beauty of your depth, your character, your heart. You know, you're a very humble man. And so I'm going to share some accolades that I've heard about you, that you've been serving, people who are at the very wit's end of their psycho-emotional, if you will, disposition in the hardest places in life. You've seen suffering, and from your heart, you've become such a profound man of service. And this is one of the main topics I felt that you could really share about today. And you've been serving people in these ways with all different types of holistic healing methods, indigenous methods, heart methods, and such. So thank you so much today, Anthony. I really appreciate your heart and you being here with us, fellow Warrior Sages.
Thank you, Satyen. And I'm coming from you. I feel that deeply, knowing the work that you do, the lives that you touch, and having had the introduction to Andrew. Andrew's introduced me to so many remarkable human beings, people out there in service and doing their part to contribute back in so many ways. And I felt an immediate camaraderie when I first heard about you. He kept talking about this gentleman, this Satyen, you got to meet my friend. And then we met that one day and I just went, oh, wow. Andrew never gets it wrong, but he couldn't have got it more right. So it's a great
and my Suzanne had such a beautiful connection.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, we spoke for quite a while.
She saw you right away, and she knows people who are in their genuine depth and gifts. So thank you, brother. So let's dive into, just please share with our warriors. So this is our Warrior Sage community. Folks who are committed to the path of the warrior, the spiritual warrior of integrity, clarity, service, as well as the sage, the inner awakening to our true nature, our wholeness as a being. So please share a little about what you do in your journey so that our friends can know a little about it, okay?
All right. Thank you for that. So like so many of us, I thought I was a good person. I was. I thought I was doing the right things, probably within the context of what I understood societally was correct and morally was correct. I had my own photography business. I worked in exchange for fees, and I provided something that I thought was of value in the world. And I was very physically active. I had a great life. I had remarkable friends. I traveled a lot. This was all prior to 1987. I was one of the official photographers with Expo when it came to Vancouver. I had gallery shows of my work. I was enjoying my life. I was very optimistic and very positive. And what I'm coming to is the fact that most of us, and most of the people I've met since I started working in the field of uplifting people towards their human potential, was that most of us don't tend to make very big changes if we're content.
Yes.
And content is a dangerous place to be in for a lot of us, because what happens is we become complacent. We may appreciate our life, but we also put up with a lot of stuff. We may have a lot of intellectual understanding about what values are and everything else, but until something pushes us, we rarely find out where the rubber hits the road for each of us as an individual. And for me, it was a health crisis. In 1986, I took off after Expo to travel around Australia and Southeast Asia. I had a year planned to travel. At the 6-month mark, having had a great time, I came back to Canada for my sister's wedding and a reunion. And I got jet lagged that didn't go away. Basically didn't go away for 8 years. I'll give a little bit more about that. I'm a slow learner, so it required 8 years for me to get the message. And the message, well, I'll come back to that. So I got profoundly sick. I got terrible from a very, very active provincial level athlete, competing in soccer and squash and badminton and running and everything else. I became so fatigued I could barely function. And I'd get 1 to 3 hours a day where I was sort of able to do a few things, some days not at all. I was in and out of hospitals for 4 years. I dropped drastically in weight and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me, least of all myself. And eventually I have a background in biology and kinesiology. So I was looking for that one thing. It's got to be one thing. It's not my fault that I'm sick. Come on. I'm fit, I'm happy, I'm active, look at my life, it's terrific, I'm not suffering from lack of money. So obviously something got me. At the 4-year mark, a friend of mine who had been as or more successful than myself up to that point, who had been sick a year longer than I was, finally got a diagnosis in Ontario for something called Lyme disease. I went, hallelujah, never heard of it. Obviously, that's my problem. Let's find out. Got tested, came back positive for Lyme disease. So I put all my apples in that one cart. If I could just fix Lyme disease, I'll be fine. I spent 4 more years on antibiotic therapies and stuff like that, relying on the mainstream medicine to try to reclaim my health. And I had ups and downs as the drugs would push the pathogen down. I'd feel better for a while, and then it would come rushing back, and all the symptoms, the arthritis, the palsy, and everything else would come rushing back in. And I never knew when it was going to happen. So I couldn't plan my life around this. I couldn't identify a rhyme or a reason for why I felt better at this time. And then this set of symptoms would come back. Coming into my 8th year, I'd had a longer remission. I was feeling like maybe I'm out of this at last. And then in October, September, October, it came back the worst it had come back in those last 4 years. Terrified me. I was angry. I was furious. I was frustrated. I couldn't understand why I couldn't get past this thing. I was sitting in the kitchen. I was reading a Reader's Digest, the little paperback ones that they're monthly or whatever it was. And they have quotes. And I'm at the table. I'm getting ready to go back to the hospital. And I read a quote that's often attributed to Kipling and others as well. And it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a new result. And it was like, whack. I'm not going back to the hospital. I'm not going back to the doctor. I have no clue what I'm going to do next, but I can't continue like this. It's not a life.
Yes.
It's not a life that I'm prepared to live. And then at other points in my life, when recent to that, I'd been sponsored to go and hear Tony Robbins speak at one of his presentations. It was a 1-day presentation. It was dynamic. I remember when I went in, I went into the room and there were all these crazy people and they're dancing and they're on chairs. And I'm like, this is nuts. I don't understand. I'll just sit at the back so I'm close to the door so I can slip out when it's necessary. And I'm sitting there watching these people. He's not even showing up. It's half an hour and they're having a hoot. The music's going. And I realized they're having a good time.
Yes.
Regardless what's going on here, they're having a good time. And so I got up and I started to dance a little bit and enjoy myself. And then I got up on the chair and I was feeling alive. And then he gave his presentation and it was tremendously motivating and encouraging. And I got a lot out of it that I was able to use to start bringing my income back in, even in the few hours that I could work. And he said something really interesting. And this loops back to this day sitting at the table of the kitchen. He said something that really struck me. He said, if you want to achieve a level of accomplishment, success, just to excel at something, he said, don't turn to the teachers. He said, find the people who have done the thing.
Yes.
Read about them, find out what they did and model their path. He says, there's nothing wrong with teachers who know stuff, but if they're not living it, why are you listening to them?
Yes.
And often these people, they don't have great big formal education or whatever it is, whatever their field is, they've self-educated to a large degree. They've surrounded themselves by people who've already got to a level and a place and an understanding similar to what they would aspire to themselves. And I went, wow, okay, I need to use that piece. And I did. I used it in my photography career at that point. And I started sort of tapping into other people in the arts who had done very well and learned a little bit and started applying it. So that day at the kitchen, because I never applied it to my health, sitting in the kitchen, 8 years sick, every doctor, every specialist you can imagine, wow, still not better. I've decided I'm not going back to them. And then that penny dropped. What did Tony say? Find the people who have done the thing, yes, and model after them. Well, here's the thing, Satyen. Those people have been trying to get through to me for 8 years, and I kept pushing them away. kept
Yes.
pushing them away because they weren't wearing the white coat. They didn't have the expertise. They don't understand. I was healthy. I was fit. I was an athlete. This is just bad luck. I got some pathogen and it's taking me down. And I'd push them away and push them away. They've been in health food stores because I go into health food stores using them like drugstores. Oh, I heard I need germanium. Oh, I heard I take one thing. It made me feel better for a week or two. Then it would stop, so I throw it away.
Yes.
I wasn't looking at my health as a whole, in spite of my background in biology, which again is about reductionism.
Yes.
So I went back to these people. I said, look, I know you've tried to get through to me a few times. Tell me your story. Don't tell me what to do. Tell me your story.
Yes.
Interestingly, a lot of people who work in health food stores have gone through a health crisis.
Yes.
And they've turned their life around. And of course, like a born again non-smoker, they want to tell everybody. And of course, that just drives everybody away because you want to evangelize. So they found that working in the health industry, they had an audience where they actually felt they could contribute, whether it was for an income or not. They were finding their audience. I'd been in and out of the health food store, but I hadn't been their audience. I became their audience. I listened to their stories. People who had overcome cancer, people who overcome chronic fatigue syndrome, which was very, very common back then. This is 1995, 96. Right. Fibromyalgia, the yuppie diseases, which was the disparaging way to discredit it. Yeah, you're really sick. We've got nothing for you, but don't you dare label it as something because it can't possibly be yours to label.
Right.
And these people generously gave of themselves. You know, they were in pain to be on the clock working in the store, but then I'd go for tea with them and coffee. And it was confusing. It was encouraging, but it was confusing because they did different paths. One person did TCM, somebody else did Ayurvedic, somebody else was practicing some form of naturopathy, but they all got better. Yes. And at first I wanted to discount it because there's no consistency here.
Yes, yes.
And then I remembered one of my professors. He was teaching a course on problem solving within another course. And he said, if you've got a problem that's new to you, he said something similar to Tony, but he applied it to problem solving. He said, rather than try to work it out entirely yourself or using your academic understanding of the problem, he said, find people that have already solved the problem, but don't find one. He says, find as many people as you can, 2, 3, 4, who have solved that problem.
Yes.
Then what you do is interview them. You'll see that they didn't all do it the same way. He said, look for the commonalities between their approaches.
Yes, the pattern.
The overlaps.
Yes.
There's many ways to solve a problem, but there's usually one way that's going to be most expedient.
Yes.
And you'll find that in the commonalities. So that's what I did. I listened to them and I said, okay, what are these? I didn't throw them away because they were better. I wasn't. Okay, I had to be humble. What's in common?
Yes.
And at first it was kind of fun because what I thought were different things turned out to be the same. So for instance, one person would only drink distilled water. Somebody else would only drink reverse osmosis water. Somebody would only drink ionized water. Somebody would only drink water from a live spring up in the mountains. Somebody would only drink water blessed twice by a holy lama. I don't know. They all had the thing in common. They all drank a lot of water.
Yes.
Okay, so I said, okay. And it was all pure. Nobody drank tap water. That got better, right? Yes. So, okay, what could I afford? And that's what I had to look at that point because I hadn't been working very much. But it was the same about food. It was the same about exercise. It was the same about all these lifestyle factors, which we won't go into great detail here. The point is, I looked for the commonalities that I could afford and I could apply. I now had great hope because I understood these people had actually done something active to regain their health. So therefore, I could try something active to regain my health. They weren't relying on other people. They were certainly accepting the knowledge and experience of others, but they weren't letting people tell them how to get better. They were owning it. And they were also owning why they were sick, which was a bit of a challenge for me. Because I didn't, like so many of us, I was in denial that I played an active role in the reason I wasn't getting better. 3.5 months of intermittent, well, not intermittent fasting back then, doing 3-day and 2-week fasts, putting water where I'd never put water before, up the tailpipe, doing skin brushing, doing rebounding, eating a pure mostly raw, organic, plant-based diet. I did all these things that were new to me in being applied in my life.
Yes.
And I woke up one morning and I went, I think I'm better. Now, that 3.5 months was up and down and all over the place as my body got rid of chemical, because I'd been on antibiotics for 4 years. My guts were just wrecked. I had a lot to heal besides whatever Lyme disease was. And yet each step tended to bring me a little higher, down a bit, higher again, down a little bit.
Yes.
And I woke up early, which wasn't something that happened for 8 years. And I rolled over and I went, I'm going for a walk. And I went to Stanley Park and I just walked. And I realized I was alive. I wasn't just living, I was alive. That wasn't the end of the story. I had a lot of healing to do physically, and I had a lot of integrating to do in my life, but I knew I was there. Now I rushed back to my photography because I needed to make an income, I thought. And I was pretty broke at that point. But what happened is the people in the health food stores who had seen this dramatic change, because they'd seen me coming in off and on for years, and all of a sudden I'm vibrant and alive. They say, would you talk to my niece? She's got cancer. Would you talk to my uncle, my wife, or my husband? And I had a background in public speaking, and I used to teach motivationally, and I used to teach first aid, and I used to teach what would we call it? The actual learning process. I taught these courses. So I didn't mind talking to people, but I didn't have the credibility.
Yes.
But I talked to anybody. Sure.
Yeah.
And the more I did it, the more fulfilled I realized I was feeling. I could get paid $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to do an extensive photography assignment, or I think I was charging out back then at $500, $600 an hour in my field, and yet I'd get that. I had one of those great big monstrous cell phones that you sort of walk sideways with, and it would ring. Right. And I think it was a job, and somebody say, I got your name from so-and-so, and maybe you can give us some hope. And right in the middle of the photo assignment, I went, why am I photographing another development? I was an architectural photographer. I get it. It's income and I appreciate it. I'm good at it. But damn, this person's in need.
Yes.
And so I ended up slowly eroding a very successful photography business, or what was becoming once again a successful photography business, because I had a lot to rebuilding to do. And I'd rush off to a hospital just to talk. I was making no claims. I wasn't doing this for money. It just, people had helped me. I wanted to help them. Now, your audience is probably familiar with the term lifeguard personality. And most people with big hearts are lifeguards, because when you've discovered what's bringing you joy and fulfillment, you want to share it.
Yes.
Now, I had been a lifeguard. I was a first aid attendant. I trained with the ambulance service. It was in my nature to help people.
Yes.
But I didn't realize that it could also be my purpose, my calling.
Yes.
And it took a few years as it slowly shifted into realizing that's all that really, that's what I wanted to do, was just show up. I also didn't feel that I could justify charging for it. I didn't see it as a job. I'd done a lot of my personal development, spiritual reading, and I always academically had this idea, which again, most of your audience is probably fully aware of, and I know you are because you're in such service, is that wouldn't it be neat if all we needed to do was show up and do what was our calling, to share what we have to share to support others and the world.
Yes. And
trust that we'll be taken care of. Now, I didn't have alimony payments. I had no children. I was completely broke already, so that wasn't an issue. I had a beat up old car. I thought, well, nothing to lose at this point. Let's be courageous. Well, I did have a potential income because I was rushing my business back forwards and I was getting lots of work. So that was building rapidly. It gave me a cushion, but I said, I'm never going to charge. I'm never going to treat it as a job. If somebody asks for my help, I will simply do what I can. Well, that's 25 years ago.
Wow, Anthony.
And it was rough at first because the universe has a way of testing us. So you think you're ready to just be out there of service, do you? well, how about you lose your apartment? How about you lose your storage locker? How about you're going to spend some time living in the back of your car on various friends' couches? I had to have a place for all my photography equipment. I had a dark room set up at somebody's place, and that was great. But it got really, really thin there for a while. But I thought, oh, I'm just going to keep doing this. And eventually, I guess, whatever that great intelligence is, or the flow is, or whatever you wish to call it, said, okay, you're doing it. Carry on. And I've never wanted again since after about the third or fourth year of that. And I haven't charged. I don't have bank accounts. I don't worry about it. And I'm completely, absolutely taken care of. It's never on my mind.
Bless you, brother.
Yeah.
This is there's forms of courageous warriorship, strengthening yourself, making yourself impenetrable strength, but to be on the other end of warriorship, of absolute heart service and trusting that you will be taken care of. This is profound. Can you, like, how did that happen? How do you actually live? Like, how do you live without accounts? And yeah. I'm just curious, what's the actual pragmatic reality behind it?
And it's a dynamic pragmatic reality. As everybody's well aware, there are actions in motion right now to try to further constrain us, take away our rights and freedoms, yes. Control the flow of energy we call money. Yeah. The single biggest word is trust. And okay, there's two words, trust and gratitude. Okay, trust and gratitude. Trust that if I show up and do what I believe is the right thing at this moment, that it will be its own reward. Gratitude that I'm able to do that, and gratitude for all that I already have and already know. Never to doubt in any significant way that I will be taken care of. And that doesn't mean I'm a Pollyanna. I mean, life is, I get flat tires just like everybody else. I fall downstairs upon occasion, or I end up working for somebody who turns on me because they've never had anybody give to them before. So they have to make you wrong. But staying in trust that this will work out, gratitude that I get to do what I believe is right. And then the third part is non-attachment. Non-attachment. You cannot work in service and be attached to outcomes if you expect the flow to happen. The moment we become attached to any outcome, we block the outcome that might be appropriate in that situation. And we don't know what that is, right? Now, over these years, I've taken a lot of education. I've read hundreds, if not thousands of books. I've got a lot of knowledge. Yes. And I've learned a lot about how healing can be facilitated and what people need to look into to understand why they're stuck in certain places. But if I'm attached to the idea that if I share this knowledge, they're going to get better, forget it, right? If I'm attached to the fact that if I show up and give you all my time, attention, and love to this individual, they will survive whatever this condition is, then if they don't, I'm a failure. And if I believe I'm a failure, then I'm not much good to anybody else, let alone myself. We don't know what anybody's path is meant to be. We can only address our own. So by showing up and doing the best that I can and sharing the information I think is most appropriate and connecting people with the best network of people that can support them, regardless what the outcome is, I've done my part.
Yes.
I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I'm going to bless and move on when I'm no longer needed or when the situation has changed. When I was a photographer, you went out, you bid on the job, you made a proposal, you got the assignment, you went out and did the work, and I had my own dark room and lab. I did the whole front to end part of the project. If I then put the photographs in front of my client and they went, I hate it, I was devastated.
Yes.
Because my identity was wrapped up in the whole process, including the end product. And that doesn't work because everybody else that you're working for, with, or around, they have their own needs and beliefs and everything else. You have no control over that. Yes. So part of my 8-year process of being sick was learning to let go of the need to control. Just show up, do the best you can, come from the heart, find out what's congruent with who you are, and give up on the need for control. Control is the belief that somehow you are going to be fulfilled by the end result. It's not the end result. It's the life lived. It's the process experienced. It's where are you coming from and letting it flow.
Beautiful, beautiful, Anthony. This is really touched by not only what you're sharing, but the embodiment of you living this principle. You know, these are universal principles you're sharing, but to really risk, if you will, going to the degree of total surrender and trust to have a way of life that represents this, you know, these eternal principles of service and unconditional offer and unconditional giving, and really releasing the grip of control so that the universe really gets to flow through us, as us, with us, in alignment. You know, in recent years, I know you've been working with people who've had addictions. And in this day and age, addictions are it's a big topic. There's all forms of addictions.
Yes.
And the psycho-emotional background, what's humming inside people's beings,
oh yes,
them to move into that. Would you kindly share about your experience with addictions, why we have addictions, and perhaps some positive insight into the healing journey, moving beyond them?
Sure. Well, I'm certainly no Gabor Mate. So that gentleman, go listen to his videos, read his books, find opportunity. He did an interview with, oh dear, lost it. Not Braden.
Greg Braden?
Sorry?
Greg Braden?
Yeah, perhaps. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But Gabor Mate is somebody to look up.
He was here just a few weeks. He was on this.
Of course he was. That's right. Yes. However, to simplify it from my perspective, and again, there are no absolute truths when it comes to this, because everybody has their own journey, and who knows what came before they incarnated, if that's the case, and who knows where they're going and what lessons they need to live. So from the perspective, if I'm dealing with somebody with an addiction, my outcome is not to help them break their addiction. My outcome is to help them understand why they are addicted to whatever they're addicted to, and then help them make the choice and changes if that's appropriate for them. But of course, we want them always to get better. Addictions, from my perspective, are the habit, the pattern that somebody has found to try to escape the reality they perceive they are stuck in that isn't serving them. So if somebody comes up through childhood with uncertainty all around them, whether they've got alcoholic parents, or they're moving all the time, or they're never acknowledged for anything they do right, and they're only acknowledged for what they do wrong, and they get punished, whatever it is, they are looking for a safe place, a place of certainty, a place of security. They're looking for some way to say, I have some control in my life. And control can be no more than just hiding. If I find a really good hiding spot and I can't be hurt, punished, seen, heard, whatever it is that I'm trying to avoid, well, that's a form of control. And when we feel disempowered or out of control or always at risk, and this, whether we have addictions or not, we all have to deal with these emotional states. We all just have different ways of doing it. If a person growing up is, as a child who is not well resourced and doesn't have much understanding what's going on around them, they're going to find tools to try to cope. Now, those tools might be on a scale of 1 to 10, they might be a -8, right? They may, in the immediate moment, save them some grief and pain, but of course they magnify into much worse problems later on.
Yes.
Addictions start off as people trying to find, in most cases, I believe, a way to either numb the pain, safety, or avoid something that's going to make their life worse, or forget what has happened to them, right? So if I've got a shopping addiction, and I've worked with people with shopping addictions, whatever it happens to be, shoes, or as Gabor Mate acknowledges, maybe CDs, music, whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with an addiction, quote unquote. It can be a habit. It can be a form of solace. It's when it starts to control us that we consider it an addiction, or when it starts to hurt us, it's an addiction. I want them to identify what it is that they are trying to replace or avoid with their addiction.
Oh, okay.
What is the benefit? And there's always a benefit to every addiction. Otherwise, the person wouldn't have got engaged in that addiction. So what is it they're trying to avoid? And then, is there the possibility of a better way? This is the thing they've often never thought about, because they just don't want their addiction if they're trying to fight it. I don't want the pain that comes with addiction. I don't want the loss of social connectedness. I don't want to be dying here on the street. There's something they're trying to avoid.
Yes.
But they were already trying to avoid something. That's why they have the addiction. So let's go back and let's find out what it is that the addiction was trying to benefit them for. Yeah. Now, yes, we still have to deal with the addiction. Now, a shopping addiction doesn't tend to be terribly physical. Whereas a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, of course, now you've got the tendrils of the actual compound getting in there and messing up with your biochemistry. So of course, we have to find ways to support the healing at the physical as well as the emotional and spiritual level. And in this day and age, we have many tools and many professionals who profess to help people with addictions, and many of them do to one degree or another. But if they're not addressing why the person has the addiction, they're just going to replace that addiction with something else.
Yes.
I've seen it over and over again. We need to find a substitute. We need to find a solution to what it was. And, you know, there's organizations like AA that do amazing work for Alcohol Anonymous, and there's Drug Anonymous, and there's all these different organizations where coming together with other people in a trusted, safe environment where they can talk about what's gone wrong in their life can be very beneficial. But what's really interesting right now is there is a sea change in the relationship to psychedelics and similar compounds. Back in the 50s and 60s, there was tremendous work going on with things like LSD and others. And these were seen as basically going to be the most powerful psychotropics ever discovered. They were seeing remarkable results. There was work going on at UBC that was was life-changing, world-changing. But then, of course, for political reasons and others, it got suppressed and twisted and everything else. And we lost that momentum. And I'll come back to what the psychedelic thing's about. But what's happened now is studies all over the world are going on as they open up the acceptance that psychedelics have a benefit used properly. And I am seeing people who have struggled for years. I've seen people who have been trapped in cycles of self-abuse and self-harm in an attempt to try to feel something, go through one therapeutically guided psychedelic session and come out and go, oh my God, that's what that was about. And now they're on a healing path. And maybe they do some more sessions with their psychedelic psychotherapist or with their other therapist or whoever it is. It is fast tracking recoveries, not just from addictions, but from so many life restricting decisions, thought forms, patterns. And we're living in a very exciting time with that.
We're in a psychedelic renaissance for the great good. You know, my first foray into this was 30 years ago. I was deeply involved in meditative arts, enlightenment, self-realization processes, self-inquiry. I was really what you would call the right-hand path. And one of my crazy wisdom teachers brought me to the forest of Ireland and gave me a cup of tea, which happened to have a whole bunch of mushrooms. And I'm like, what is that? Are you crazy? This is nuts, right? Anyway, I trusted him, and it was my first introduction into that whole world. And I was blessed to be mentored by him on how to utilize these sacred plant medicines for the sake of raising consciousness and healing.
Yes.
And it's been suppressed for all the reasons we know about. But now it's starting to open up in so many ways. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience of it, and why do you think going into these altered states of consciousness, which some people who've never experienced might be fearful, how does that allow us to become aware of the internal dimension and then heal? I'm curious about your experience of that.
Well, these same compounds that can absolutely revolutionize in a positive way a person's life and understanding of life and the world and where they are in it, of course, are, because they are mind altering at some level, they are also open to abuse. So I want to be very clear. These are not magic in and of themselves. The magic is within the individual and their understanding of what they're doing and why. I am about to receive a visit. One moment, please.
Yes, please.
Hello, come here. This is Bear. He just arrived at the house.
Hi, Bear.
And Bear is profound therapy. He really is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I had to greet him, otherwise he would not leave me alone.
Sure. Same size as our Prada.
So what we're seeing with these, what happens in our mind, in our brain, the jelly in which the receiver for whatever it is we are in this physical realm. When we're children, we have hundreds, if not thousands of more, we make hundreds, if not thousands of more connections as we're in our first few years of life. And then what happens is we start trimming them back, because we can't have all the options open all the time. We'd never be able to make a quick decision, and we need to be able to survive in the world the way we found it. So somebody who's raised in Uganda, living barefoot in a hut, or in Canada for that matter, doing the same thing, is going to have a need for a different set of patterns in order to survive, okay, for good or worse. And so these get entrenched, they get entrained. And the more we go down a particular path, the stronger that connection becomes. Now, if I'm growing up in an abusive household and I have a parent who's an alcoholic who one minute praises me and the next minute beats me up halfway to death over the exact same issue, I can't trust that. Yes. So I learn not to trust. So I have to create another pathway to keep myself safe, which is avoidance, perhaps. Okay. Then they grow up to an adult and they go, intellectually, I know I've got nothing to be fearful of here, but they've got this pathway, boom, 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 boom. And every time somebody steps over the line into a pattern that they experienced when they were a child, regardless how intellectually aware they are, oh my God, they're defensive, they're aggressive, they blow up, or they run and hide in the closet, figuratively speaking. We can spend years and years and years in talk therapy and on the couch and trying to create new patterns. And that's valid, but it's really inefficient.
Yes.
What can be done when psychedelics and similar compounds are used appropriately is they light up the brain, and all of a sudden different parts of the brain are communicating, much as they did when you were a child. And they will literally put in bypasses around those dysfunctional, very strong highways we've created. And in that state, both the intellect, because we know a lot that as we've grown up as an adult, starts to apply to the new pathways, and it appears that we choose better pathways. We create new, more functional pathways. And so people can change their lives very dramatically. So somebody on a heroic dose of some sort of mushroom or LSD or another psychedelic like 5-MeO-DMT, they are going to have a boom and everything opens up at once.
Yes.
And in that space, they may feel love for the first time without conditions, because it's fully internal. Yes. And but their brain goes, oh, like that pathway. Let's put that down for future reference. Okay. And all of a sudden, that relationship I had with my mother, where all I ever think about my mother is her screaming at me in the kitchen that one time I dropped a plate of hot spaghetti on the floor and burned the cat. And then it's all of a sudden, oh, I remember her putting me to bed. It was there. It's just that it had a very thin not very supportive pathway. But in the psychedelics, all of a sudden it wakes up, and people will say, oh, look at that. I remember that wonderful experience. I was loved once. I was safe once. I think I'll focus on that now. I think I'll embrace that more fully. And then the important part with psychedelic and similar psychotherapies is you don't just leave the person. They don't just go out into the world after their 1-2 sessions. It's the integration. Yes. Because you've just woken up that little path or just created that new path, but it's not terribly robust yet. You have to give it attention. You have to give it support. And this is where talk therapies, group therapies, doing journaling, all these different things to try and reinforce and strengthen that pathway. So that the next time you go into a therapeutic session, you know where you want to go a little bit more, strengthen it. So these compounds that nature ultimately has given us, even when we create the synthetic psychedelics, they're all working with molecules that are known to the body.
Yes.
Which is curious. Why are they known to our bodies? Why do we have this incredible biological, biophysical relationship with mushrooms or cannabis or whatever it happens to be, the ecocannabinoid system? We can then build upon it. My first experience, because I was very cautious, I was very conservative. I didn't do drugs in high school, maybe a little bit of marijuana here and there once or twice. I was very conservative. I was leery of alcohol, which I'm grateful for now that I was leery of it. When I started becoming aware, and this is before the sort of Renaissance started really opening up, I kept hearing about ayahuasca. And I was intrigued, but I was cautious. So I read Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent, which was very exciting. I recommend everybody read that book. Whether you've participated in an ayahuasca ceremony, whether you never intend to, or whether you're looking forward to the possibility, read that book, The Cosmic Serpent. It's a great read. I read that, then I did some research on what was going on down in South America, in those nations where it's accepted and used as both a religious sacrament, et cetera, as well as for medicinal purposes. And I had the opportunity to go and have my first ayahuasca experience coming up. And I was ready. Okay, I think I'm ready to step out of the normal.
Yes. Went
down to Mexico with a group of friends. I was sponsored by somebody I'd helped. And I didn't realize how much healing potential existed inside my body. I was already working in this field.
Yes.
But in my first ayahuasca journey, I went through my body, visiting every organ system and loving it and thanking it. And I had such gratitude. And I just felt the love I had for so many people and the love they had for me. And I went through this entire Rolodex. Some of you probably don't know what a Rolodex is. You're too young for it. It's the old paper, keep your charts on pieces of paper and flip through them. I went through this entire list of connection and self-love and feeling the love, and also knowing that I didn't need the love to come from anywhere else. It was already there. If that's not a healing freaking experience. And that was the day I became completely detached from the need to heal people. I came detached from the fear of my own inevitable demise or death. I became completely fearless of my fears. That doesn't mean I don't have fears. They don't scare me. Yes. They inform me, right? Yeah, I'm not going to step in front of a bus. I fear being smashed. But if I step in front of a bus and I'm killed, that doesn't concern me in advance of the situation. It's just like life is happening. And I've since participated in ayahuasca many times with different teachers and in different schools of thought around the ayahuasca. And I have seen so many people have profound, remarkable changes. And I'm not saying that this is without risk. I've also seen people who weren't ready for that revelation, weren't ready for that degree of internal processing. And this is not because they were weak or anything else. It's just that they had some other programs that needed to be addressed perhaps a little differently first. And I've never seen anybody not come back stronger in the long run, but I've seen some people have some really tough weeks and months as they tried to figure out what their place in the world really is, because they can't let go of their attachment that they just learned that they don't need. And there's a term that you and most of your listeners are probably aware of, consensus reality. It doesn't change because you changed your understanding of reality. Yes. And you have to work in this world with everybody else. But if you can light up the circuits, your own circuits, and again, live in gratitude, live in trust, and live without need of controlling the circumstances, it's a wonderful place to be. And these compounds, these medicines, these sacred medicines, that many of them have been around for eons, they accelerate and facilitate our ability to get to that space.
Beautiful, Anthony. So well shared. Trust, gratitude, and non-attachment. We're in very interesting times, as we all know.
Yes.
What are you seeing right now? What type of things are you dealing with people's suffering?
Yeah.
You know, with all this insecurity and, you know, the underpinnings of reality are all falling apart.
Yeah. And reality is a hallucination in and of itself. Everybody that is listening to this has a different reality than everybody else. Reality, from the human perspective, is the decisions we make about what things mean. Now, I'm not saying concrete suddenly becomes water, and I'm not saying that I'm going to step outside and I'm going to fly, but my perceptions of what are happening in the world are uniquely my own, right? So there's the concrete, but then there's the meaning, and the meaning is unique to each of us. So with a lot of stuff going on, much of which is hard to know what is factual right now, a lot of people are feeling very lost. They don't have a strong place to stand. And since most of us are conditioned societally and through family and everything else to be fearful of things we don't understand, there is a lot of fear. I'm supporting people as best I can to come back to their own personal center and understand their own place and what their own priorities are. And to not be getting attached to the latest story, the news, other people's fear. I think probably the most damaging vector path coming at us is the mainstream media. Yes. And it doesn't mean I ignore the mainstream media. If you present me with a lovely plate of beautifully roasted yams with cinnamon and everything else, and I have a serving of that, that's fine. But if all day long, 24/7, I'm cramming those things down my throat, yes, it's going to be toxic to me. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter that it might have had some value at one point. The mainstream media, the tendency is it's very hard to get away from it in our society. And so it's on the news all day, it's on the radio all day, and it's all the same story coming at us all the time. Fear, 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 more cases, more whatever it happens to be. Go hide, don't look at other people, you know, put your face diaper on, whatever it is. And I'm not saying there isn't valid information in there, but it's this constant inundation without any let up, without any, don't look up and look at the sky. Look over there at the dog playing down the street. Look at the people you love. What matters to you most in your life, not what's being done around you and to you. So we need to find new flows of information that support us in better ways. And they're there. It's just, of course, the social media and the mainstream media are very bereft of that. Your programs like yours bring so much hope and light. And you've got a lovely following, you know, 7,500 people. But what are the other 36.5 million in Canada doing right now? They're probably listening to CBC, you know, or they're probably sitting in their house fearful to go out and get groceries because they think they're going to die of a disease that has basically had no real statistical impact on all-cause mortality anywhere in North America. But most people don't even know that because all they hear is case, more case, more case, more case. I have friends who work in the hospital system because I work in integrated and holistic medicine now. And I work with doctors and I work with oncologists and I work with ER room doctors and everything else. And their story is not the story on the news, and they're working in this field, right? I'm not saying they don't have fears and everything else. They're human beings. But the fact is, on any given day, we hear about how many people are going into the hospital for that disease. They don't report how many are leaving within 2 hours of admission.
Oh,
because what's happening is people are getting tested.
Yes.
They get a positive test, they panic.
Yes.
They go to the hospital. They're basically looked at, checked out, and say, get the heck out of here. Go self-quarantine. You're not sick. But it's all reported as hospitalizations. So we have to understand the bias and or the interpretation of the information we shared with us.
Very interesting.
So again, my role,
yes,
help people get out of fear. Yeah. Fear will do. Bruce Lipton does the best job of anybody. Look up his videos online, look up Bruce Lipton and Biology of Belief. Fear will do more to damage your health than anything short of that bus running you over.
Yes. Right? Wow. Thank you, Anthony. You know, in the time we have left here, these are warrior sages, and all of us are committed to, you know, serving the world in a better way. What's in your heart, Anthony, to share with us warrior sages? Or what's in your heart to share?
Yeah. I already know most of you guys are there. Trust in yourselves. Trust in the guiding principle of your heart and let it guide your brain, not the other way around. But don't discount the brain. Okay. This is a processor that helps us understand that's blue, that's green. And if you step off that, you're going to fall to your death. So it's got very important information for us. But if my brain is telling me, oh my God, if you step off that, you're going to fall to your death. Now you've created a different reality. Come back to your heart. How can you be of service while taking care of yourself? And the big word that I'm saving at the end of this, and so this is now the time. We talked about trust. We talked about gratitude, and we talked about detachment. In my paradigm, my belief system, the overarching word, if there is a word that encompasses where and what we should be working from and for, it's love. If whatever you're doing isn't coming from love, it's the wrong thing. End of story. Now, again, your brain may say there's a danger over here. Great, that's real. What you do about it has to come from love. If it doesn't come from love, you're part of the problem. You are magnifying the fear, you are magnifying the problem, and you are also hurting yourself.
Brother, thank you for the living embodiment of these wisdoms that come so freely and beautifully through you. Your words, your heart, your essence has touched me, and I know has touched our Warrior Sage family here. And you've brought it back home to really what it's really all about for me. You know, trust, gratitude, non-attachment, and love. These perennial wisdoms which you so beautifully live. Thank you. Thank you so much, my brother. Thanks for the service you do in the world. And I'm looking forward to our time together.
And the same from my side. And to all your followers and to yourself, such gratitude. Much love.
Much love. Namaste. Be well, Warrior Sages. Much love.